As we welcome you back to Cardines Field here in Newport, Rhode Island, we have a packed booth here as we're joined by Dr. Sims and Fuller Coles here of the descendants of that historic game played on 1918, July 4th between Army and Navy overseas. And gentlemen, first of all, thank you so much for coming into the booth here. This is a really special day, not only for our country, but historically, 100 years later. It was just a few months before the end of World War I. And, why are we celebrating this? What happened on that special day back 100 years ago?
Well, 100 years ago in London, Admiral Sims organized a baseball game between an Army team and a Navy team, and 50,000 people attended in the stadium in London, including the King George V. And the purpose of the game was just really to present to the English people and the Allies a vision of America that was helping out in the war. And for me, this is about the Navy's role in the war, which was so important.
First pitch, Gethings grounds out to the shortstop, McCabe, for out number one. And it was, at a time where a lot of tension throughout the world. And for two powers around the globe to be able to reunite like this in a very symbolic way. Obviously, it was 100 years after, or it was 100 years from now, but it was many years, hundreds of years after the Revolution. I'm not going to be able to do the math right now as the first pitch to Tawa's in there for strike one, but how big was that as a step for kind of rekindling the relations transatlantically?
Sure, and the amazing fact is that in 1917, merchant shipping across the Atlantic was being sunk at such a rate by German submarines that there would have been impossible to transport troops or food over to Europe. And it was only by the cooperation of the U.S. Navy and the Royal Navy that we, the U.S., sent 95 destroyers across to Ireland and England to protect the convoys. And so the role of the Navy was to jump in and help out and cooperate with the Royal Navy and literally to save the outcome of the war. And you're right. On July 4th, 1918, victory was in sight as a result of that fabulous cooperation between the two navies.
Tawa grounds out to short for out number two. And Fuller, you were the grandson of Ensign Charles F. Fuller, who was the catcher for Navy during the 1918 game, and I believe he played for the Red Sox. He had a brief stint with Boston during that time, or?
Nope. Welcome. It's a wonderful honor to be here, first off. That was Mr. McNally.
That was Mr. McNally.
Yep. And he is a friend of mine. He could not make the game today. But I'm thrilled my grandfather was a naval pilot, flying a biplane, basically supporting channel crossing ships as best they could, and family lore would go that he literally just would take a small bomb out of his cockpit, drop it over the side of try and hit the enemy ships that were trying to sink our ships and do reconnaissance. And
how much do you think that the Navy and the Army, was there any there's always healthy competition between the two branches of the government as Hosey lines out to Imwale to end the inning. But was this, were they having fun with it as well? Because, it's always go Army, beat Navy, or the other way around. Did that exist back then when this game was going on?
I believe the commanders, like Nat Sims' grandfather, was instrumental in creating that as a goodwill effort. And also there was competitive nature between Army, Navy, just in sports, music, everything that didn't have to do with battle, but they cooperated absolutely on the battlefield, in my understanding. So your next interview will be with David from Naval War College Museum, and with John, who's the other grandfather.
All right, well, Fuller and Dr. Sims, thank you so much for coming on, and really appreciate everything that you guys have done and your efforts towards this, and your knowledge here for letting not only us know but everybody else listening here today. So have a great rest of your July 4th and enjoy the evening.
Thank you very much.
Again, Fuller Coles, the grandson of Ensign Charles F. Fuller, the catcher for Navy during the 1918 game, and Dr. Nathaniel Sims, the grandson of Admiral William S. Sims, who was an instrumental part of making that game happen to really solidify the relationship between the United States and Great Britain in a time where the two powers were very much needed to work together and keep global peace as much as possible. Obviously, World War II was right around the corner, but again, they were allies in that one too, so certainly important, and it was a pleasure having them in here. Bottom of the first went quickly as Newport went down 1-2-3 as we head to the top of the second, still 1-0. Danbury on top, and Russell Smith is back out on the hill. He will face Walker Imwale, Jake Frasca, and Nico Popa here in the inning. Imwale batting from the left side, Smith working from the windup. First pitch, breaking ball, misses low for ball one.
It is really remarkable, what those guys have brought to the table and what they, their insight on all the knowledge, and it's enlightening to hear what they have to say and the duties that they serve for our country.
1-0 pitch, another curveball, this one taken for strike one, and we have a couple more guests here, 4 on the evening and possibly more, I'm not sure. This time we're joined by Dave Conan, the director of the John B. Hattendorf Center for Maritime Historical Research, as the 1-1 is lifted foul down the left field line for strike two. And John DeGraff, the grandson of Jack Egan, left fielder for Navy. And John, as I understand it, you have the watch that was depicted on the program for that Army-Navy game back on July 4th, 1918, and it's right in front of us now, but that is something else.
Thank you. Yes, my mother gave that to me as a family heirloom about 8 years ago. On the back is engraved, as you can see, it was given to the winners of the Army-Navy game of 1918 by King George V. And to my knowledge, this is the only one in existence.
And it says on the back, winners baseball game, U.S. Navy 2, U.S. Army 1, before H.M. King George V, as that one is hit into left field for a single. London, July 4th, 1918, presented by Ingersoll Watch Company, Ltd. That is something else. I mean, to have that in our presence is very special. And you see there was the crest there as on the top of it.
And it was actually made in Bridgeport, Connecticut.
It was made in Bridgeport, Connecticut, really?
Yes.
Wow. That is something.
And to my knowledge, it still works. I gave it a half a wind about 8 years ago, and it went.
And it's still going. If you were to wind it right now, would it still work?
Yes, sir.
Wow, that's special. And Dave, you're the one collecting all this, so much knowledge. What was it like to be able to see this? It's at the museum in Newport, and just to have this in the collection, so special.
So it's a tremendous honor for me to be able to have the opportunity to not only meet family members of such historic figures who served our country in wartime a century ago, but also to have the opportunity to work with the families to sort of rediscover artifacts, really treasures of the nation that are sitting in drawers and up in attics, and having the opportunity then to place those items on display together for the first time after a century. The actual baseball signed by King George, the actual watch presented by King George, made in America. King George, the King of England, just 132 years after his great-grandfather had a little fight with a guy named George Washington, and here we are celebrating the 4th of July. The fact that the king acquiesced to come off his throne and have a hot dog and watch a baseball game is kind of interesting.
Yeah,
symbolically, this watch, the baseball he signed, and the scorecard that Admiral Sims kept are symbols of the fact that the American Revolution ended just 100 years ago tonight in London at a baseball game that King George V himself attended.
Very special. It was from 1783 to 1918, and to have baseball be the thing that did it really in a time where it was much needed in the globe. And there's a lot of history between Newport, the town, the city, and just the Navy in general. You have the Naval Academy Prep School, you have the War College, you have so many things, and obviously a huge port. How was the Navy affected by the Revolution during that time in the late 18th century?
So the U.S. Navy was established in 1794. The Continental Navy was established in 1775, and it was because of legislation that was passed here in Rhode Island. The Providence Navy was really the precursor to the Continental Navy, and it was the Rhode Island State Navy that really set the stage for what became the Continental Navy, and of course our U.S. Navy today, still fighting for peace worldwide. And I just got to say that the World War I connections with Newport are very strong, as demonstrated by the fact that this ballpark is named after Private Bernardo Cardines, who 100 years ago in September gave his life in service of the country on the Western Front in the First World War. And I just want to connect all that to the baseball game that happened on the 4th of July 1918, and the fact that John DeGraff and Nat Sims and Fuller were here tonight in Newport. I mean, how much more historic can you get than that? What an honor.
Very special. Well, thank you for coming in here. It's now 2-0 Danbury on top off the RBI double from Sean Buckout. Frasca scored from third. Popa now stands on third with Buckout on second. Still just one out in the inning. Canios with the 1-1 pitch. Here it is. Swung on and missed for strike three. So it was a 1-2, and that will be the second out of the inning. Third strikeout of the ball game for Smith. Guys, thank you so much for coming on here. Enjoy the rest of your stay. Really special, unbelievable to have this kind of thing in our presence.
I do have one other thing to tell you about this watch. The very same day that this game was being played 100 years ago, my great-grandfather's daughter-in-law was being born.
Wow.
So, to me, this watch is priceless.
Everything.
Family heirloom.
Everything. I mean, that is, words can't describe how special that is, for the country, your family, and really everything else involved. So, once again, thank you guys so much. And, again, have a great rest of the July 4th.
Thank you.
Again, it was Dave Conan, the director of the Maritime Historical Research, and John DeGraff, the grandson of John Egan, with us in the booth as Tavares takes strike one on the outside corner. So the inning was led off, a strikeout looking for him, Wally. Then Frasca had the single, Popa with the single as well. Buckout had the RBI double scoring Frasca. And Canio struck out as that one is under the glove of Mazza, rolls all the way to the backstop and allows Popa to score from third. So it's now 3-0 Danbury on top. And they are just not only hitting the ball, but taking advantage of some early mistakes here by the Gulls.
Yeah, it's a couple pitches left over the zone for Smith. All the hits coming to the left side, 3 in a row from Frasca, Popa, and then Buckout goes off the fence just over the head of Hogeson and off the pass ball there, advancing on the runners.
Here's the 1-1, hit off the end of that. Slow grounder, right side. Plouffe coming in. He's got to make a quick throw, and he's able to do so. Nice job there by Plouffe to end the inning. But Danbury gets 2 runs off 3 hits. They leave 1 runner on, and they lead it 3-0 as we head to the bottom of the second inning right here on the NECBL Broadcast Network.